Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, in recent days, Ukraine's army has made modest advances. A counter-offensive that began in early June shows little signs of breaking through Russian lines in force anytime soon. Let's go across to Shivan for more details on the same.
Thanks, Aim. I'll take it from here. We're, of course, talking about the counter-offensive, which was highly anticipated, and now the results are coming in for this as well. Now, the progress of Ukraine's operation has made some Western officials nervous. Here's a look at how the fight for every yard on entrenched front lines is unfolding. Ukraine's army has made modest progress in the south, and Russian forces have made advances in the Donbas region, the industrial heartland of the war-ravaged nation. The war's frontline is frozen, and a month after the launch of Kyiv's much-heralded counter-offensive, neither side seems able to force a decisive breakthrough. Ukrainian forces over the past week recaptured 9 square kilometers in the east. Now, the country's deputy defense minister says Ukrainian forces also captured 28 square kilometers in the south. It is a far cry from Kyiv's lightning successes, seizing 9,000 square kilometers in just 9 days east of Kharkiv at the start of last September. Now, it was followed by 5,000 square kilometers more in November and in the Kherson region. Moscow, on the other hand, has spent months, and they've spent months consolidating their defensive lines. And the results are showing right in front. Some of Russia's defensive lines now run to a depth of 30 kilometers. In the south, Ukraine has far fewer support units than combat units. They are only using a fraction of their brigades as they can't support more. In order to punch through Russian defenses, Ukrainians need a deluge of shells. Kyiv lacks superiority in firepower. That is exactly where they are lacking. And Putin has more artillery pieces than Ukraine. For several months, Russia has been banking on small explosive Lancet drones to pepper Ukraine's western artillery pieces. A top NATO commander said it is not a surprise that Ukraine's counter-offensive is not progressing at speed. The chair of NATO's military committee stated people should never think such a counter-offensive is an easy walkover. Now, there are reports coming in from NATO that they are addressing. He added that an operation of this type is extremely difficult. Ukrainian commanders are being cautious in probing for weaknesses in the Russian lines as they risk losing a lot of forces in full-on assaults. All right, for more on this, joining us live from Washington, D.C. is Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute and an assistant professor of law and director of the National Security Law and Policy Program. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thanks, Shivan.
Jamil, Russian troops are advancing in 4 areas of the front lines in eastern Ukraine. Now, this is a quote-unquote from a Ukrainian defense minister, deputy defense minister, I correct myself there. NATO is also accepting the fact that it will not be a cakewalk. Now, these are words which one would not have expected from the West or from Ukraine, given the kind of anticipation they had before the counter-offensive. What has caused the counter-offensive to sort of fall off its mark?
Well, Shivan, I think the reality of the situation on the ground is such that the Russians have had time, as you pointed out earlier, to build up their fortifications. This is not unexpected. It's what anybody would do in their position, consolidate their forces. They've retreated in a couple of places and been able to strengthen their lines. And as a result, the Ukrainians are facing a significant defensive front. This is not unusual when you're on the offensive to face a significant barrier, and it takes some time to break through. The Ukrainians have been successful at breaking the Russian lines in a couple of places. They've established a beachhead on the Russian side of the Dnieper River. And so there are places where the Ukrainian offensive is having success, but there's no doubt it is going slower than I think they and the allies expected.
Right, so that being said, Russia is still making advances. Does it mean that the recent Wagner attempted mutiny barely had any effect and hardly deterred Russia's onslaught in Ukraine?
I think there was an expectation that having the Wagner forces off the field and also the potential impact it might have had on the regular Russian military's morale might have an effect on their fighting abilities. It hasn't appeared to be that way. In fact, it seemed to have had very minimal effect on the actual fighting on the ground. And so it does appear that the Russians are having some successes. The Ukrainians are having some success. But we've seen this situation before. The battle has been at a stalemate for quite a while. The counteroffensive is making slow progress, but it is a challenge. This war may go on for a while. As Shivan was pointing out earlier, what the Ukrainians lack is significant long-range artillery. The U.S. has been talking for months about ATACMS. They previously gave them HIMARS. ATACMS are those long-range Army tactical missile systems. If the Americans and our allies if we want the Ukrainians to win this war, we need to give them everything they need to win this conflict. Right now, they're fighting to a draw, as it seems.
Mr. Jaffer, now, Ukraine perhaps needs to rethink their strategy moving forward. But the question is, what are the biggest challenges for Ukraine at the moment, and what do they need to change to continue?
Well, look, Shivan, I think you said it exactly right, which is it's the lack of artillery, it's the lack of shells. Those M1A1s the U.S. promised months ago, they're just now starting to train on them. That's going to take a while, at least the fall, to get in the fight. We've seen how effective the German Leopard 2s are. We need to get those M1 Abrams in the fight as well. And we need to supply them with these ATACMS missiles that go on the HIMARS batteries in order to get that long-range distance, potentially hitting the Russians behind their lines and really taking the morale away.
All right. Well, Mr. Jamilan Jaffer, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your inputs on this.
Thanks, Kim.